Is up, Luke.
What is
Luke,
happening, everybody?
how are you doing today?
Doing good, man. Yourself?
I'm doing good. You know,
Happy Friday.
every day, happy Friday. Absolutely. So, we wanted to talk about Zoom when we were actually preparing for this. We were talking about Zoom, and my thought was that we talk about how the technology has evolved. 15 years ago, when Zillow entered the market, they were really kind of the first person to do this, do their lead gen on a big scale. Um, and it wasn't impossible, but it was challenging to duplicate that technology as a single practitioner. And now not so much. So that was kind of my thought that we could talk about. What were your thoughts?
hmm Um, the what really comes to mind in regards to Zillow, iBuyers, that where how things have progressed is a lot of it's really like, um, you know, this is our like the individual agents competition, right? Like they are coming for everybody's paychecks. They're not shy about it either. They're coming straight out and saying it. So it's taking a look at that and like what's on the horizon, where things are heading, and how do we combat that, or what can we do in order to, in the face of that, at ultimately the end of the day, like I personally believe real estate is there's so much of relationship, and I'm sure most agents would agree with that, but not to um not to shy away from the reality of things, and like how much portion of each individual transaction, what percentage of those are not having, that traditional buyer's path there, or seller's path.
I think maybe if we talked about this long ago, like, I don't know, more than 3 months ago, I would probably have tend to agree with you, but the market has shifted so, maybe not 3 months, maybe probably more like
Yeah.
6 months and beyond. That with the rise of interest rates and everything that's happening, you
hmm
look at Compass, who recently just came out and said, "Look, we're not buying properties anymore. We're not incentivizing agents anymore." You look at
right.
Zillow; they've exited the whole iBuyer space. You look
hmm
at Anywhere Real Estate. You look at all these major companies that were really heavy into kind of the iBuyer model. And I look
yeah.
at the iBuyer model no different than trading in your automobile. You're not going to, it's a wholesale price. It's somebody who
Right.
wants quick, fast, easy. Now, the iBuyers, in order to compete, and this is why Zillow lost a ton of money, is that they were bidding over market value, thinking that they were going to be able to play the market and play the appreciation of the market. But then, I mean, that didn't really work out for them. So I don't necessarily think that they're in direct competition. I think
hmm
there's always going to be, let me back up. There's always been those investors who's always marketed to homeowners saying, "Hey, look, I'll buy your home in 3 days, cash offer,
right.
as is, but it's going to be 20% lower." So that buyer's always been in the works. It's just that these institutions, they were chasing yields and they did that. So I don't know. I mean, it'll be yet to be seen, but I don't. I think the yields, the margins, I don't think they're there yet um, for these large companies to really continue doing what they've been doing, especially bidding at or above list price. I think they'll
Right.
probably have to readjust and come and start offering lower amounts, but there's a value to the ease of transaction, to making sure that no one likes to sell a house.
Right.
It's just, I mean, I don't. Been in the business a long time. You don't. I mean, you got to pack. You got to keep the house always clean. You always got to vacuum. You always have to be ready just to, go walk
Right.
around the block. It's inconvenient. So those are my thoughts on it.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's like I think in large part it's like, okay, what are, this technology, or their business model, how that works, and seeing like, okay, they're doing this at scale. How does an individual agent, stay relevant? Like, what value do they bring outside of that? Like, how can they carve out their piece of their market, or whatever it is? And that's where I'm, coming back to, like, hey, this is, there's always going to be that relationship component to it, and figuring out like how to marry those two type of, technology, relationship, like what's the best of, how do we get the best of both worlds there, um and really taking a look at their business model and and what they do, and saying like, okay, this works. People like to see homes, right? That's what they want at the end of the day. When somebody's shopping, that's like the first thing that they do. They go look at homes in the area. So like, we don't need to recreate the wheel, or give the people what they want, type of a thing. I'm a big believer of like looking for examples of what works, and modeling that, or how do we add to that and build on top of that, type of a thing.
Yeah, and to build on what you just said is how does that individual compete? And the one
Hmm.
thing that they can compete on that the large institutions can't, and a lot of their competition won't, is taking advantage of the modern consumer journey. I think relationships by itself is always going to take precedence, and
Hmm.
number one, and staying top of mind. Now, what we talk about, and let's be honest, this is why you and I are doing what we're doing. I mean, we
Right.
know a lot about what we're doing. We could just have this conversation like we've done in the past. We don't have to share our conversations with anyone, but we do it so that people are allowed to, number one, get to know us, like us, trust us. Number two, let them realize that, hey, we kind of know what we're talking about. And number three, we are the authority. We can help them navigate this whole digital modern consumer journey. And if
Hmm.
they would just take that same approach to their clientele, to their geographic area, to their ideal client, and started to be front and center. I mean, it doesn't cost any money. I mean, it really doesn't. A YouTube page is free. Heck,
Hmm.
even Zillow lets you have a video on your profile page. It doesn't cost you anything. So there's a lot of things that you can do, and when you do have that top of mind status, you are more valuable from a dollars and cents perspective than the person who's cold calling them out of the blue. So
Yeah.
I think to your point, that ties in right exactly to what we're doing. It doesn't matter what industry you're in, you just need to be known.
Hmm.
That's it. I mean, step one, have a
Yeah.
business, have a service, and let people know that you exist, because you've heard me say this. Right now there's someone out there who's thinking about selling their home, or for mortgage professionals buying a home, and if they don't know that you exist, there's a 100% chance they're not getting the business.
Yeah. I absolutely love that, and I reiterate that all the time. And it's a, if somebody doesn't know you, they can't do business with you, period. And I love the way you put it, even more so. It's like 100%. You have 100% chance of not winning that business. They don't know who you are. Zero.
Zero. It comes down to that old saying: if a tree falls in a forest and there's no one there to hear it, doesn't make a sound. Now, there's also talking about a bear defecating in the woods, but I just decided to use the more. Decided to use the tree instead.
um,
But
awesome.
here's the thing with Zillow, kind of going back to what I was talking about and kind of diving into the technology of things. I remember when Zillow first came out, and there was a lot of skeptics out there. They didn't think it was a model that was going to succeed. They didn't, they're like, oh, it's a fad. It's just going to go. Well, boy, were they wrong.
All right.
And what's interesting is Zillow, whether someone likes them or not, is pretty much irrelevant because they're here to stay. Zillow's model was they took information and they allowed the consumer to access it on their own merit, on their own time, when they wanted to. and uh, in exchange for them trading their contact information for them. And then they just sold that contact information, that lead, to, you know, to other agents. So they really took this buyer representation and they just stuck something right in the middle of it.
Mm-hmm.
Because most of the time when people wanted information on a property, they would have to go to the listing agent, and then that listing agent would get the deal, and they would be able to, either sell that property or perhaps sell them a different property. Or if it's a buyer, then of course that goes through the relationship. So I bring this up because I remember what that technology was like. How challenging it would have been and how expensive it would have been to duplicate that kind of technology on an individual basis.
Mm-hmm.
And fast forward to 2022, it it blows my mind that as inexpensive it is, now technically challenging, not as much as it was, but still a little bit technically challenging.
Mm-hmm.
But it blows my mind that agents haven't adopted. All they have to do is just adopt their game plan, stay local, don't be, you know, the world, and stay local, and they'll be able to
Yeah.
generate their own leads, higher quality because they're going to be local, and it's really not that hard to do. I mean, you and I, we could put something together in a day and have a
Yeah.
campaign running. Why do you think they don't do that? Do you think it's probably more lack of knowledge? It's, they know what they want, but they don't even know step one.
Yeah, I think a lot of times with, I mean, especially you look at the journey of somebody just getting licensed, right? They go through all the effort, time, effort, and energy of like learning all the rules and the regulations and all that stuff, and and that's effectively where everything stops, right? And then they're like, okay, now go out and, figure things out. And then they may give them like, they may be armed with a few short things of like things that you can do, but um, there's no, hey, this is how you get business type of a thing. Here's the next step of the journey. And honestly, I mean, because there's so many different ways of going about it, that's hard to serve up, and obviously the industry's relying on the broker or whomever to help, or the company to help with that next phase of the journey. And everybody's going to have different skill sets, everybody's coming from a different place. So I think there's a ton of different factors that go into it, of saying, hey, here's what it is. And a lot of it too, at the same time, the technology and stuff changes so quickly. It can be hard to keep up with things, um, for a lot of people, especially when they're just getting going, they're learning the learning curve, drumming up new business. There takes it, when in any business, there takes a level of like reaching a certain plateau before you have enough like breathing room to be able to do that next type of a thing. So it's like where, once your basic needs are met, then you have the mental space to be able to start to do that next thing. So I think there's a number of different hurdles that can prevent people from, from doing what they want to do. Knowledge, time, space, money. So not one singular thing, but the resources and information. I mean, there's no lack of information on how to do everything. You have, millions of hours of YouTube videos where you can pretty much do figure out anything that you want to do at the tip of your fingers. Um,
Yeah, and I think there lies some of the challenge right there. When 20 years ago, when you first get into like sales, into mortgage, into real estate, there was really just a commonality in regards to the training, and that commonality is still today.
mhm,
Take the list of everybody that you know and just harass them by the phone. Just call them and just morning, noon, and night. And then once you run out of them, just find a geographic area and just call all the homeowners and do the same thing. And that's for a different video. We've talked about that before. But I think there's a lot of noise out there. And to your point, there's all you have to do is go to YouTube and look for some sort of real estate training, and you're going to come up with a gazillion different videos to watch, which
Right.
there lies the challenge because it's a lot of different options and there's a lot of choices. I don't know about you. When I go to one of these mass restaurants that have a 10-page menu that has literally everything in there, it takes me longer to order because I'm like, well, God, I don't know what I
Yeah.
want. What if I order the wrong thing? What if I would have, and it's food. I've never gotten the food and not eaten it, but it's what, do I want this? Oh, maybe I want that. And it just
Hmm.
takes you longer to do that. And I think that especially when you start looking at the digital space, you have social, you have search, two primary components. But then you have organic and you have paid.
Hmm.
But then you have all these different channels of social. You have all these different channels of search. You have all these different strategies. You have this person saying one thing. You have this person saying that
Right.
other thing. And so you're just really just kind of looking around like, man, where do I start? And I think
Hmm.
that's probably the biggest challenge with number one is just taking that first step, knowing that first door to go through. In fact, while we're on the subject, I mean, you're in this space. What do you think that first step is? Doesn't matter, salesperson. What's that first step? They got their
Yeah.
license. They got, they went through the testing. Doesn't matter if they're mortgage or real estate. What do you think is step number one?
Um, so I mean, I have a you know bit of a bias just based off of like the services and how to help people. One of the commonalities that I see amongst 95% of the people that I come in contact with that are interested in growing their business, and it is they they just don't have enough people to talk to. Period. So how do they go about doing doing their day-to-day stuff, but having a consistent and predictable flow of new opportunities that they don't have to do spend a whole lot of time, effort, and energy on. Um, one of the one of the easiest, most cost-effective ways that I feel right now, and it's still, I mean, it's Facebook and Instagram ads. There is the amount of like volume um, and consistency that you can get with them. Now, one of the big challenges that I see for a lot of people when they first get started with this is then it becomes bottleneck becomes sales and conversion, and it's these leads aren't good type of a deal. But then there's the other agent who's more equipped with sales skills, and guess what, they're converting at a really high rate. Um so if I was to say just one thing for people to get going on, a simple and Instagram campaign is one of the easiest ways of having consistent, predictable. I'm talking about every single day. You can get leads for $1, $2, $3. You're at a bare minimum. Like if you can fog a mirror, you're going to close 1 to 2% of them, right? And that's just like just showing up and not ruining things. And mathematically speaking, it's a little bit of effort, to convert, to deal with 100 people. But if you are getting leads at $3 a piece, and you get 100 leads and it costs you $300, and you're making 3, 6, 9,000, $12,000 off of that, that math works. right? And you can predictably grow from that starting point.
Yeah, and then I mean, and then when you're in a market like mine, where your commission is you're making 25, 30, 40, $50,000, the
Hmm.
math works even better.
Yeah.
One of the things that you had said that I'd like to highlight on here is it's lead generation.
Hmm.
People are not having enough people to talk to. Now, as you know, I run one of probably the nation's largest real estate role playing group, and we talk about skills and we talk about how to communicate with people. But those skills don't matter if you don't have anybody to talk to. So
Yeah.
you can continue to get ready to get ready to get ready to get ready and not have anybody to talk to, or you can focus your efforts on lead generation. In fact, it doesn't matter what sales industry you're in. It doesn't matter if you're in real estate or mortgages, selling shoes. You need to have somebody to sell to, and it's much better to be very good at generating leads to generate those conversations, because if you have, let's say, 10 leads and you just totally blow it on 9 of them, you still get that one. But you could be really awesome, but if you only have one person to talk to, you better be more than really awesome, especially in my market, because for every real estate agent, there's probably 9 more that are knocking on the door that are
Hmm.
trying to get that person's business. Because they're trying to get the business late into the game. If they're trying to what we talked about earlier, they're not nurturing it. They're not creating that content. They're not developing their own kind of tribe. They're not staying top aware.
Hmm.
Whereas when people don't know somebody in the business, they're going to look for somebody in the business. The key, especially when it comes to listing business, the key is to get the people before they're ready to start talking to the agent, when they're looking for information.
Yeah.
And that's where it comes with creating that content. Allow them to get to know you like you try. One of the things I talk about, and this is very controversial. This is very controversial, especially with the people I talk to. And I'm a firm believer that you should open up the book. I think that people, when they go to a website, when they're looking for information, they're looking for
Hmm.
all the information, not looking to be sold. And if you restrict information and you put it behind an opt-in wall that you have to talk to them, that you're forcing people to schedule an appointment with you, they know it's a sales call. They're going to be
Hmm.
reluctant to do that. There's a gentleman in Canada, been in the business, really great guy, top producer in Canada, and he's an open book. He has his whole action plan on his website. He has his whole fee structure on his website. He does a ton of social media. He does a ton of videos. He puts everything out there. And what he does, he just gets come list me calls. He gets come list me calls because every single question, every single possible objection, all the information that the consumer is looking for, it's
Hmm.
right there. And they get to make that decision. As Google says, most people make the decision before they actually speak with someone. But
Right.
um, he doesn't get any objections, because if they've gone through and they've gone to his website and they looked at this and they looked at his action plan, they looked at his fee structure, and they still call him and they
Right.
still schedule an appointment with him, that's a hot prospect. 77% of all sellers only meet with one agent, anyways. So
Yeah.
now, if you have all the questions, I mean, what are you going to talk about if you put everything out for people to learn about? I mean, what are you going to talk about?
Not a whole lot
Not a
left,
whole
right?
lot. Not a whole lot.
Yeah.
So, but the fear is, if I tell people what I charge, then they're not. Then they're going to, they go automatically go negative. Then they're
Yeah.
not going to work with me. And I don't believe that's true in 2000. I don't believe that's true in 2022. I think that if you restrict information, that people see right through it. And
Hmm.
number one, the agent thinks that they're so awesome on a skill set that they can convince somebody who doesn't have all the information they need to make a decision, right there on the spot. That's where
Yeah.
the "let me think about it" objection comes in.
Totally. The there I definitely agree with you in regards to, like, having it. I've gone back and forth myself personally with things like this, like putting prices and stuff on websites. Um and it is and I'll say this because it takes a certain level of skill um, and energy to be able to have a system where people have all that information at their fingertips,
True.
readily available.
Definitely true.
And at the same time, like, stuff changes fairly rapidly too. So, like, the effort to try to keep things like that current is a
Challenging.
whole nother thing. And so, like, I believe it's definitely something to aspire to, moving towards that and building things out that have the ability to answer as many questions as possible for your prospective clients. um but and so there's that side of me that says, like, hey, I like, this is how I like to shop. This is how, these are the things that I would like to do. I would like to get this information. um but then on the other hand, like, I truly believe that, the when somebody has, the opportunity to have a conversation with people, so much of any buying or purchasing decision, there is an emotional component to it, where it's like, you got to create that emotion to create that action to get them to move. Like, like, very few people are sitting around, um, you know, going through everything they need to do to be able to buy their first home. Like, they're scared of that, right? They don't know what they're doing. They don't know how to do X, Y, and Z, and all the different things of it. They have financial fears. They have, commitment fears, whatever it is. And there's so much of that, like, emotional component of it, that's like, they need to have somebody to talk them over that, to be able to take that next step. So, I'm definitely a foot in one and a foot in the other. And I mean, unless you're like, can make a beautiful masterpiece of, like, a webinar type of a thing, like, it's a hard thing to accomplish,
Well, and I think you and I said a lot of the same thing, just at different points of the journey. So
Right.
I think, and going back to what we talked about, that this is why video is so important.
Hmm.
Video allows you to get to know, like, and trust somebody. If all you did was just had a written text and it was just like a menu, that's probably not going to work. But if you take the time and you create this content, video content, that talks about your service, that talks about you, that talks about the way you do look, 90% of all the questions, all the objections for someone who's looking to sell and looking to buy are all going to be the same. The
Right.
10% that aren't the same is going to be very unique to that person's situation. Might be a little bit crazy. You might be the crazy questions. That's where that comes in. But 90%, buying a home. How do you buy a home? How do you get a mortgage? What does this mean? What does a rate mean? What does all of that mean? Selling a home. How do I do that? I'm looking for, those are all going to be the same questions. For a listing agent, it's what do you do? How much do you cost?
Hmm.
That's really what it comes down to, and that's if a consumer is really thinking about it, they're that's true with everything. If you're going to go out and buy a car, what does it do? What are the features and benefits to the car, and then how much it costs? And your budget is always going to have a play into it. If you have a Ferrari taste but yet a Honda budget, there's really no point in going to the Ferrari dealership. So I think that front end discovery phase allows you to build a relationship with the consumer. We always talk that people do business who know you, like you, trust you. Get them to know you, like you, trust. Nowhere in there does it say that you have to like them, know them. It just says that they
Hmm.
have to know you, like you, trust you, and they can do that through the video, which gives them that sense of comfort to reach out to you, to have that conversation,
Hmm.
knowing what you do, knowing what your experience is, knowing, for me, all my dad jokes that I typically throw out at any given time. And that's going to be a deciding factor on them saying, you know what, there's absolutely no way I want to work with Brett. And I'm okay with that. I realize that there are
Yeah.
going to be people who just, I don't, look, if they don't like me and they don't want to work with me, chances are I'm not going to like them and I'm not going to want to work with them either. So it's kind of a mutual, almost a pre-qualifying process to go through a funnel. But to
Yeah.
your point, it's 100% vital that they work with someone who they trust and that can, after they watch a video, it's going to generate five or more questions, and they
Hmm.
need to have that one-on-one uh, ability to have that conversation with you. So I think you and I are really on the same page, just maybe a little different, farther in between on the journey.
Something you said where, it's like, um, they know you, like, you and trust you, and, somebody wanting to work with you and you wanting to work with them. I get this a lot where it's like, where you have like, an agent or a lender, and they're working in a particular area, and they have concerns about, other agents doing similar things in this certain area. And I was, a lot of times it's like, it's something I'll say is like your vibe attracts your tribe. Like, there's enough business out there that you don't have to worry about your competition. You're really just in competition with yourself and getting better, with yourself. And the people who want to do business with you will do business with you, and everybody's going to be different. Everybody's going to be going to gravitate towards certain individuals, male, female, different ethnicities, your age, I mean, there's so many different factors where people naturally just want to do business with somebody that, that they gravitate towards. And there's enough people out there that you don't need to worry about it, right? Like,
Absolutely,
I,
absolutely.
I like, I can't stress that enough. I'm like, you're like, when people are like, I'm like, do you truly appreciate how large the real estate industry is on a, on a national level? And you're talking about doing like a couple million, you're talking about a couple $1 million here of your production, right? Where there's so much business to go around.
Well, and I think the challenge that people have that mentality, what they have to understand is that when the consumer looks at your product or service and they don't see any tangible or any real difference, then
Hmm.
typically what's going to happen is it's going to turn into a commodity and the lowest price is going to prevail, right? So if your service looks a lot like everybody else's service, look, your license, okay, check. I can get you into houses. Here's my,
Hmm.
I'm going to put a sign in the yard. I'm going to put it on 300 websites. If that's all you're going to do and that's what everybody else is going to do, then you have to expect that, yeah, there's going to be challenges there because now the only way to increase value is by lowering the price. But the way, and that's why somebody's value statement, their value proposition, their unique selling proposition is so hugely important that separates them from the rest. For instance, if going back to our video, because you and I talk a lot about digital, and I think that for most people in real estate and mortgage, they think it's saturated, and it's so far opposite from the truth that the way
Yeah.
it is. I mean, it's like a drop in the bucket on how saturated it is because nobody will do it because they think it's saturated. One, or number two, they just psych themselves out and they don't want to do it. But what
Hmm.
would happen if you go out and you preview properties and you just create a video on your experience every single day, one a day, one day, one
Right.
neighborhood, one day, one park, one day, one property, and you just create that, but it's very hyper local. In 365 days, you're going to have 365 videos, which is probably 364 more videos than your next closest competitor in your market. But now
Yeah.
you're the expert. Now you're the authority. Now you can be found online. Now there's a distinguishable difference between you and the other person who's saying that they're number one. And that's where you're not going to be commoditized. I think who's Alex Hermosi. That's I've always said something like that, but he says that in the book that you recommended. I forget the title, but um,
$100 million offers.
$1 million offers. When a consumer doesn't looks at a product or service and they don't see anything distinguishable different, then the lowest
Hmm.
price is going to prevail, and you've now been commoditized. So in order to make it so you are not a commodity and you're basing on value, you have to increase the perceived value of the product or service that you're providing. Hence, the videos, the popularity, the experience, your knowledge, your popularity in the market, et cetera, et cetera. All of that has a value add to what you're doing, which is why the most popular attorney might not be the best attorney, probably charges a higher hourly rate than the person who nobody's ever heard of.
That's right.
That was a lot. Well, with that, we're
So,
at time. We're at 35 minutes. Do you have anything else you want to add?
um, nothing crazy pressing here today, but I did have a question that like what you just mentioned, like the agent's value prop. I mean, is that something that you kind of help talk with your agents about, or help craft and create, or um,
Yeah, 100%. I think that, so number one, when I'm working with agents, we first have to identify their geographic area. I think that most
okay,
agents, they get into the business and they become they want to be like the top generalist in the market. Now, I don't know
hmm
if anyone else pays attention, but when you start looking at other fields, medical, attorney, etc., the specialists
right,
are the ones who make the most income and have that most luxurious lifestyle. And in real estate, because they have a license, I'm in California, you're in Texas, because you get a state license and you can do business all over the state, for whatever reason, they want to do everything for everybody everywhere. So the first thing I talk to
right,
them about is, okay, let's identify where you're going to work. And typically that's going to be, your backyard, 10, 15 miles at
hmm
most, depending on the density.
yeah,
But then they have to identify what they want, who they want. And once they identify that, now they have to craft their value proposition to be attractive to that person. For example,
okay,
the the value proposition of someone who works in the median sales price is not going to be the value proposition that works in the uber luxury sales price.
hmm
In addition to that, the agent who fits well in that median sales price is not going to fit well because you have to be ingrained in that niche. You have to be ingrained in that market. You
right,
have to walk the walk, you have to talk the talk. It's a relationship business. I mean, we're going back to high school with the clicks. You know, you have
right,
to you have to be able to craft yourself to fit in. And if you don't do that, then you need to really adjust because everybody wants to go look, everybody wants to be in that uber luxury market, but there's not many people that are actually in there. But when you
right,
start looking at the agents that are in the uber luxury and you start looking at who they are from an outside perspective, how they carry themselves, what do
yeah,
they do and where do they go, it's very much in alignment with, for example, I'm just going to give you an example and we can kind of finish this up. I just talked to a real estate agent who sponsors a polo team. She plays polo, she sponsors a polo team, and she is very much ingrained in that culture and therefore gets
yeah,
a lot of business from there. And it might be somebody who's very ingrained in NASCAR, but those two cultures are not going to mingle well,
right,
right? And they're going to be looking for a different part of uh, person, which is, that kind of goes into the whole marketing and advertising and interest-based psychographics and demographics and all that stuff. But going back to your thing, yeah, I think having your value. One thing that will work always is if you took a if you took where you live on a map and you take a styrofoam cup and you just draw a circle around it and you just focus on people who own homes and live in that market area and you just start creating a lot of video content, schools, homeowners associations, properties, neighborhoods, parks, businesses, shortcuts. I mean, there's so many things that you can talk about. Just go start doing that and you're going to be start known as the area expert. It's not going to happen overnight, but you always have to be consistently consistent. But I mean, you've experienced this, I've experienced this. It works, but what happens is when most people want instant gratification, if they do one
hmm
video and they get nothing on it, all of a sudden it doesn't work. Kind of like dieting. And but if you stick with it, there's gold in them hills.
I absolutely love your styrofoam cup plan. That is that's something that you could coin right there, and it's so simple. Everybody knows a styrofoam cup. You know, you just have that imagery. Hey, you want to here's the first thing that you need to do, or here's how you do this. Bam. I heard something a while ago, and it was like, so it was a newer agent. He wanted to go work with somebody who'd been in the business for a long time. He was like, hey, I want to be that, I want to be under your wing. And the guy said, he told him, he's like, hey, move to the neighborhood and you live here for 6 months and then come back, minimum 6 months to a year, and then come back. And I think that speaks, directly to, what you're talking about with that styrofoam cup model of, hey, this is my market. This is what I'm going to go after. And so
You want to
super
get
cool.
crazy? Use a red Solo cup. Why not? Start with the styrofoam cup,
Start with
saturate
the
that.
bottom of it.
Your secondary market's going to be
get,
a Solo cup.
get your Dixie cup, your
Yeah.
solo cup.
It's funny to your point with the neighborhood. I heard a similar story, but it goes into selling cars. If
Hmm.
you're going to sell Porsches, you have to go and buy and drive a Porsche. You can't be
Right.
driving a Honda. The people who own a Porsche can sell a Porsche. The people who don't own a Porsche have very challenging with their sales to sell it, right? So
Right.
kind of that same analogy.
That's funny. When you were going through your analogies of like the markets and the demographics and the polo and the race car, what instantly came to my mind when you're talking about the luxury market was like, hey, if I live in Newport Coast, like I'm gonna want an agent that lives in Newport Coast to sell my Newport
Right?
Coast home. Right?
Makes
Like
sense.
that's the person that I want to be in control, because that's
Because they
their
want
wheelhouse,
people who know the market. What
right?
better than the person who knows the market than the person who lives in the market? But they also want experience.
Yeah,
They're probably not going to choose the brand new agent just because they're in there. But you can also specialize when you start looking at luxury agents. They
well,
don't
they're not in
specialize
Newport Coast
geographically.
because they're new.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we're at time. So that was an awesome chit chat with Luke and Brett. So stay tuned. We're going to go ahead and bring you more. All right, Luke. We'll talk to you later, my
Awesome.
friend.
Rock and
Stay
roll.
on.
Whoop, whoop.